What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the post-launch show or the overview of what actually is in the Siege of the Atlas. And what you're watching here is a pretty high-quality trailer. I was pretty blown away, and it was nice to see that they didn't just go with the 4 conquerors and 1 main boss route, and they actually tried something different and reworked the entire Atlas. And the soundtrack in this trailer is actually pretty top-notch. But basically, you will be going through the Atlas, a revamped Atlas without watchstones, and you'll try to fight these 2 sub-bosses that represent 2 different influences, and then 2 end bosses, which represent the 2 different influences. And those 2 influences will have a new whole set of implicit mods, and the influences are mutually exclusive with the previous influence types. So what you're watching here, it is all footage from the boss fights, and they look pretty cool. The arena looks very visually stunning. It looks like there's going to be a lot of ads in the fights, and that is the Eater of Worlds. And you can see it is called the Atlas Besiege. And more importantly, at this point in the trailer, I was completely blown away. I kind of expected Watchstone system to go away, but right now you will see that they showcase a whole new Atlas-wide passive tree. I do believe that this point right here is the cornerstone of the expansion, getting rid of the old Atlas and allowing us to customize the whole Atlas instead of just certain regions. I'm going to give you what I think about it, and we're going to go over all these changes in a pretty short summary, or I hope it's short, and let's get straight into it. And yeah, the league is Archnemesis, and it kind of plays like Talisman. So this is a nice little title screen I made, Siege of the Atlas. You can see everyone preparing for the siege, and this is one of the endgame bosses. So right away, new bosses, right? And influences. There's the Searing Exarch and the Eater of Worlds. And there's also 2 sub-bosses that you have to fight, corresponding to the Searing Exarch and Eater of Worlds, that you have to do before you can fight the endgame bosses. So there's 2 endgame bosses. They're actually doing a boss kill race in solo self-found hardcore that you have to kill Maven, the Searing Exarch, and Eater of Worlds. Now, this is the new map device, as you can see here. So you can choose the influence you do, right? You can do the Maven, you can do the Searing Exarch, or you can do the Eater of Worlds. So it's going to be really interesting what people will actually choose. Like, what's actually going to be the best one to do? What will be the most profitable? So it's kind of like a choose your own journey now, instead of doing like Maven and Cyrus influence at the exact same time. You may also notice that the Zana mission is no longer on this map device, and you actually have Kirak missions, which we'll go into later on. And this button over here brings up the Atlas passive tree. So now we have the new currency and uniques, and boy oh boy, some of the new uniques, or one of the new uniques, is completely game changing. And these are the new Eldritch Chaos Orbs, Eldritch Exalted Orbs, Eldritch Orb of Annulments. So these are the new currency they teased. So what this stuff does is you'll understand how they work a lot better once you see how the Eldritch Implicits actually work. So basically, these are ways of meta mod crafting, but slightly better, right? So if you have full suffixes or full prefixes, then you can use these Chaos Orbs or Exalted Orbs or Orb of Annulments. And I think the most strong orb is probably Eldritch Orb of Annulment, because this acts as a targeted annul of sorts. It's not completely targeted. You can't target one mod, but you could actually target a prefix or suffix, and it doesn't force you to add a random prefix or suffix like a Beastcraft. And this one is pretty much targeted exalt for either prefix or suffix. So you can pretty much consider these orbs as meta mod crafting, but with less steps. Now right here, you might see these 2 jewels. And what these 2 jewels are completely game-changing. What these jewels allow is that you can take any ascendancy within your class. So if you're playing Berserker and you want to have, it will allow you to take any ascendancy notable from Chieftain, Berserker, or Juggernaut. And if you were Champion, you could do it with Gladiator, Champion, or Slayer. So what this means is that we can be playing Berserker with Rite of Ruin, and Blitz Charges, and Warbringer, and Aspect of Carnage. We could even get this one note over here, which gives us 100% increased effect of buffs for your Ancestral Totems. So what this ends up being is like a 30 to 40% power creep for a lot of builds. And then for a lot of builds like Raider, perhaps you can just get some utility like +1 chain that you would just never be able to have. A lot of Witch builds will be able to get Profane Bloom and still be a Necromancer, or you can even get Bone Offering to give you max block and spell block while being an Occultist, right? So it's a very, very good endgame system, and it's nice to see that the boss actually drops something good. Now, these jewels, you need 2 of them. They need to match up together, and they are corrupted when they drop, so it will be kind of hard to get the right mod, right? So this is probably going to be something very, very rare, and you can expect it to be like upwards of 100 Exalt plus, I think, for the really good notables. So this is the Watcher's Eye Chase Unique or Awakened Gem Chase Unique of this expansion. And it's actually very, very well done, and it adds a bunch of build diversity. So next up, we have how to fight the new bosses. So basically, you just do tier 14 plus maps. And as you saw in the map device, you just put an influence on it. And then you get a key to fight the sub-bosses. I'm not really sure how Maven will work. I'm assuming you just do enough T14 plus influence maps, and then you get the Maven invitation of the map bosses that you did, and then you get the Crescent Splinters, and it's like the same way of doing it as before. So after you finish fighting the sub bosses, then you do it all over again, and you get the key to fight the main boss. And the main boss in this case, unlike Maven, is something you can craft on, right? So you can see this is the invitation to fight the main boss, and the quant actually affects the rewards that are dropped by the boss. So the more quant, the more rewards that would be dropped. So what this means is that you can make the boss fight as hard as you want, and it's kind of different for endgame, because most endgame boss fights right now, outside of the Feared, you can't really make harder. Like, you can't really make Cyrus harder, you can't really make Maven harder. So the base fight of its white is actually going to be easier than Maven. So it will remain to be seen like how hard you can actually make the fight. And this is going to be something interesting in Gauntlet, because are they going to make you do a rare map, or how's it going to work? Because if the base is easier than Maven, then it's going to be a lot easier to do in general. So next up, we also have these new altars, and they're available in influence maps. So they modify characters, they give rewards, or they affect bosses, and they pop up sporadically after you kill a pack of influence mobs. So you can see here, it adds a downside, which is map boss hits always shock, but then the map boss drops +1 Eldritch Currency. And this one here is gains Grasping Tentacles while stationary, but it gives increased quant. So this is just a little bit of fun while mapping. Maybe it breaks up the mapping flow a little bit too much to have to click these altars, especially if you have a headhunter and you're just zooming around. But it does add a little bit of flavor and some player choice in mapping, which always feels super, super nice. And next up, we have the new Atlas system. The new Atlas system is amazing, and there's nothing really more to it besides that it replaces the whole Watchstone system. And now there's only 4 Watchstones. It's called Void Stones. So what these Void Stones work is that they replace the old Watchstones, and they drop from Uber Elder, Maven, Exarch, and Eater of Worlds. So what this means is that in order to get all the Watchstones, you will need to pretty much finish the whole game. Now, the power from the Watchstones are moved into Atlas passive, so rolling the Watchstones to get more chance to get a mission, or for the, the Legion to be more likely to be, Mariketh or something like that. All of that power from the Watchstones is into the Atlas passives, and the T14 plus maps drop Shaper, Elder, or Conqueror maps. So it pretty much just add the Conqueror maps into the pool. And Cyrus is 88 difficulty, so these are the Cyrus fragments over here, and they're Awakener 8 difficulty. But Cyrus no longer drops Awakened Gems, and Awakened Gems actually drop from Maven invitations. So what this means is that Cyrus is not going to really be that useful, and we have talked about in the past about how easy Cyrus is now, and how the difficulty level is not really there. So pretty much you'll just be doing Cyrus to get like Thread of Hope and its specific uniques. And what this means is that since it will no longer be so easy to get influenced items as much anymore, because Cyrus influence doesn't really exist on the Atlas besides outside of these Conqueror maps, this means that a lot of the core mods on the influence items are now moved back into the core mod pool. So that's why you can see here, this is a non-influenced item, and you can see it's +1 level of all skill gems and +1 level of all lightning skill gems. What this means is that you can probably make a GG amulet pretty easily if you use like augment harvest crafts, because of the fact that you can no longer, what's it called? It's not an influence item, so you can use harvest crafts with it. So this is the new map favoriting system. So the way it works is, as I think as you kill like more and more of the end game bosses, you get to unlock more and more favorite slots, and this is a lot better than previously before. Because previously before, you would have to pretty much do your atlas twice, and you have to do all the maps of Awakener 8, and then you also have to do all of the bonus objectives, and then you also have to complete all of the maps. So this is a lot less tedious system and redundant. Now you might be wondering, like, do you need these void stones? So the way the atlas works now is that there's no watch stones, so your atlas is T1 through T16. So as you progress it, as you put in the void stones, once you put in all 4 void stones, every single one of your maps will be T16. So you can pretty much choose any map in your atlas to farm, and there are some pretty good maps that came back and that got rotated out. Burial Chambers is making a reappearance to everyone's joy. So overall, an incredible system for helping out beginners to understand what they actually need to do in their atlas. So with the void stones, this means there's also a new sextant system. So sextants now affect the whole atlas and drop from T14 plus. They got rid of simple sextants and prime sextants, so now it's only awakened and elevated sextants. They also added some new mods. I think there's one that says all breaches are Chayula, so you can probably stack it up with Chayula with a breach scarab. And there's no more Nemesis currency, Pog. And the reason I wrote Pog is because Nemesis currency is one of the most unsatisfying things to do, because it just feels so bad to do. You feel like you're not really playing the game anymore. You're playing clicking simulator, but it just ends up being the best currency per hour. So with this new section system, this means that you will no longer need to feel like you are a loser in life because you're not doing Nemesis currency. You can feel like you're just the same as everyone else. You don't need to partake in this horrible, horrible activity. So next up, we have a new currency called Surveyor's Compass, and this stores the Sextant modifier. So if you ever roll a Sextant onto the Void Stone that you want to save later on for juicing, you can store it into the Sextant modifier. This kind of begs the question of why is there none of these orbs for Harvest Crafts, right, to get rid of TFT, but that's another story. So basically, you can utilize this to make a very, very juiced map, because if you ever hit a Sextant you don't want, you can do it later, so you can pretty much customize your mapping experience to be fully synergistic. So next up, we have Karak, the person who replaced Zana. So Zana pretty much ran away because she wanted to take a break. So Karak gives map missions in Hideout, and what this means is that you'll be able to juice up Karak's missions. So before Zana missions, you can never put Sextants on it, you can never put Scarabs on it. So this is completely different, and you also won't die because you're too busy trying to choose the mission and a mob is trying to hit you in the back. So there's new mission types. You can get Conquer influence maps, you can get Ritual maps on it, you can get Expedition maps on it, and you can also get Monstrous Treasures. So it adds to the pool a little bit more, makes it a little bit more interesting. And now Karak as a vendor also sells new types of implicits on maps. So you can see here there's a Legion encounter on this map, and there's also Delirium. I think in the past there's Harvest maybe, or I'm not too sure about that. And there's also these new currency items called Scouting Report that re-rolls Karak's missions and guarantees +1 special mission. So the type of Scouting Report dictates what type of mission you'll be getting. So you can see here a singular Scouting Report re-rolls all of Karak's missions, and a new mission includes at least one unique map mission. And here, this Otherworldly Scouting Report re-rolls all of Karak's missions. New mission includes at least one Breachstone mission. So Karak, Zana missions in general will be a lot more interesting, and you have a lot more agency over controlling it. And talking about agency, we have the Atlas customization, brought to you by GGG with 600 plus passives, and Orb of Unmakings now are part of the core drops. We're hoping they're around the same rarity as Regrets, or your Atlas tree will be kind of screwed. So you can see here there's a bunch of new nodes. They have some like strong boxes in areas, has 6% chance to be a strong box that drops Scarabs, so that should be super OP. So basically you have 117 points to put in out of the 600, so you can kind of go all over the place a little bit. There are a lot of things that return. I looked at another picture of this, and you can see that there's Flash Breach, Emblematic is back, so maps will be a lot more juiced on average. We'll be getting a lot more bleak mechanics. You can now have multiple blights in a map. So even without Nemesis Currency, I do think that mapping will be just as profitable as before. And now we have Eldritch Implicit Modifiers and how the new mods and influence types works. So because there are two new endgame influence types and endgame bosses, there are Exarch and Eater influence implicits. So what this means is that there's no actual influence item that drops. You get these currency items that adds and overrides the implicit of an item. And what this does is it also adds the corresponding influence, either Exarch or Eater influence. So these new currencies there's 6 tiers of power for the implicits. First 4 come from orbs that you get, and last 2 only from Orb of Conflict, which is kind of like a Maven orb. So in order to get the last 2 highest tier modifiers, you have to pretty much gamble it. So what it does is the Orb of Conflict is it raises one and then lowers the other influence. So if you're trying to target one influence, you could get pretty unlucky. So you pretty much have to hit 2 50/50s in order to get the highest tier of power. So you can see the tiers of power are pretty high. I think it's slightly better than elevated mod on Maven. And it does seem like a lot of the mods for the new influence bases are also based around Maven. So I wonder if we might be seeing Shrike 3 gloves perhaps. So very, very cool overall system. Now you can see here, this is a fire dot multi, which is pretty much just a, what's it called? Old influence modifier. And you can see here, you can add 2 modifiers to the item. Then there are 2 different influence implicit, and this is physical damage converted to chaos damage, and then there's chaos damage over time multiplier. So this does seem like it's gonna cause a lot of gambling to be had. So you would be trying to gamble to get the highest tier. So I don't think you could actually ever get 2 T6 modifiers. So one influence implicit will be T6, and I guess the other one will become T2 as the highest. I'm not really sure how it will work. So here you can see Orb of Conflict, Maven, Orb of this league. Only way to hit the tier 5 and 6 mods. So if you want to get the best, you have to gamble it just like Maven right now. Except you have to gamble and hit 2 50/50s. So why do you want to get the mod to be tier 6 other than the fact that it's just the highest numerical value? Highest tier mod is considered dominated for Eldritch currency. Now, I always thought that this wasn't like too big of a deal, but it's actually pretty big of a deal because of the fact that this allows you to craft without TFT harvest, and it also allows you to use augments kind of targeted, like a targeted aug prefix or targeted aug suffix is really, really strong. And it also, most importantly, I do think that this is the craziest mod of them all. And it is a targeted annul of prefix or suffix. These other ones, you can kind of do it yourself. Reroll prefix, reroll suffix. You could just use harvest TFT craft, right? There's no real like magic for that. Eldritch Exalted Orb, you could pretty much just exalt on and do suffixes cannot be changed, or exalt on and do prefixes cannot be changed. So it's not really too big of a deal. So these orbs are not too valuable. It's the Eldritch Orb of Annulment that could make crafting a lot easier. So if you have like perfect prefixes, but you have a break suffix kind of, you could do it like that. Although you could also argue that you could just craft on prefixes cannot be changed and do annulment orb. So all of these new crafting materials, like correct me if I'm wrong, can kind of be replaced with metamod crafting to some degree. But it's just nice to be able to have this Orb of Annulment and not have to spend like maybe 2 exalts to fix your item, right? So now we can see some of the mods. And you'll see here, most of these mods are kind of the same as Maven mods, right? Or not Maven mods, but Cyrus influence mods. And there are some that are pretty good, and there are even some that are specific to the new boss fights. So here you have minus 32% lightning exposure on hit in presence of a pinnacle boss. 15% chance to extinguish on hit. I'm not really sure what extinguish is. Minus 20% lightning exposure on hit. 12% fizz dot multi. 10% of fizz converted to chaos. Enemies cannot regenerate life. So there are some new ones. Adds fire damage to spells. Fire dot multi. Chaos dot multi. but there's a lot of ones that are the same as the Cyrus influence mods. So next up, we have Archnemesis League. So Archnemesis League is kind of weird. I'm not really sure how big of a fan I am of it. I do think I will like it somewhat. So the elephant in the room is when you slay regular monsters, you drop itemized mods. So this, you can pretty much think of this as Metamorph and Organs. So what these mods do is it adds something that you can put into this Essence mob that's in prison for petrified arch nemesis monsters on the map. And you can add these mods, and then the monster gains some scary mechanics. So here you can see Toxic monster has augmented poison mechanics. Siphoning ring monster is surrounded by an arcane ring that drains mana and deals lightning damage over time. So you can pretty much see you're dropping organs that give these monster mods, and then you add the organs into the arch nemesis, and then you give it these mods, and you also give it these rewards. So it's pretty similar to Metamorph. And then you give the monsters the itemized mods to free them and fight for rewards, and you want to accumulate per each arch nemesis. So this is stacking. So if you give something toxic, it will have toxic later on. And then you put siphoning ring, they're gonna have both of these mods for the third one, in addition to the one you place. And the mods accumulate per each arch nemesis, so you have to use the best reward first. So if you want to get like the currency reward every single time, 4 times in a row, that you want to put the currency reward in first. So that's why you want to use the best reward first. Now, the biggest thing about this is the fact that they don't auto go into your inventory. But Chris said that you get 2 roughly on average per area. But it's also kind of weird. They don't want you to be doing this mechanic every single map, because ideally you need 4 mods to put into the Arch Nemesis to free them. So you actually don't get enough mods that drop to do the encounter fully every time. So they kind of want you to save it. They kind of want you to combine it. You can also combine the mods up and get better and more powerful rewards. So very interesting concept. Reminds me of a mix of Talisman and Metamorph. So kind of looking forward to it. As most people know, most expansion leagues are not too crazy in depth and complicated, because the expansion itself is pretty much the league. And here are my final thoughts. I think the Atlas system is much better for beginners with the new tree. I think the old Watchstone system is completely atrocious. When my girlfriend was learning the game, it was very tilting for her to understand why sometimes she's just not dropping maps to progress the Atlas, because she's putting the Watchstones in the wrong place, right? Arch Nemesis League also looks very rewarding and not too intrusive. It seems like something that you just click 2 times, you get the organs, and then you can just put it into your mobs in the maps, and it looks pretty rewarding. You could get like currency rewards, you could get map rewards, you could get harbinger rewards, you could get cluster jewel rewards, and it seems like it's going to be very, very strong for SSF players. And the Atlas system is also very good for SSF players, because you can pretty much customize it to however you want. Now, the new influence bases are cool, but I do think that the implicits will need to be very, very crazy to beat out current influences. So for boots, in order to beat out elevated tailwind, elevated onslaught boots, and elusive boots are gonna take something special, right? So the implicits will have to be actually insane. And it's kind of annoying that more crafting will be 2 50/50s you have to hit. So it's gonna be kind of sad when you miss it like 6 times in a row or 7 times. I'm not really sure how much the Orb of Conflict will go for. And also the new influence bases, you can't really do anything to weapons, so that's kind of boring. So maybe one league will see something with more to do with weapons, right? Because Maven Orb couldn't affect weapons, and a new weapon implicits, there's no such thing, because the new influence bases are independent of weapons. So amazing league, amazing endgame. League mechanic looks very simplified, but still fun to do. And I do think that this expansion will be a huge success. I do think that this is a way of playing the game that will make it feel fresh, even though I don't think they added in actually that much content, right? We're still doing the same maps as before. We're pretty much doing almost everything the same. We're still doing Maven, except we have some extra influence mobs, and then we also have 2 endgame bosses and 2 sub bosses. So really like the system. Really impressed that they didn't just go with the 4 conquerors and 1 endgame boss, and they actually tried something different. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you find more Mirrors, Exalts, and Mage Bloods than me. I will be making 3 League Starter guides, starting with Lightning Strike Berserker, and I will be testing out the build and how to level it on stream, so come stop by. Be sure to like and subscribe, and see you next time. Bye!